والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. As we continue the lesson of Buloogh Al-Maraam, this day is July the 26th, Sunday. I think it's a Dhul Qa'dah. Wow, we're in Dhul Qa'dah already. Dhul Qa'dah, which is the 9th of Dhul Qa'dah. Wow. So the Eid is approximately maybe a month. Approximately the Eid will be probably in like a month now. 1 month. So Eid al-Adha, brothers and sisters, is not too far off. So when Dhul Qa'dah, and I think this would be the 9th night of Dhul Qa'dah, if I'm not mistaken, 1439 of the Hijrah of Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We continue our lesson in Kitab al-Nikah by the great Imam Ahmad ibn Ali ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, rahimahullah, who died 852 after the Hijrah of Mustafa alayhi salatu wassalam. In this tremendous chapter, Kitab al-Nikah, in which we've been discussing all the different types of marriages which are invalid. We discussed in regards to the nikah, or the different types of enkiha, or the different types of marriages that are invalid. When we say invalid, we mean Allah Ta'ala, based upon these prophetic, authentic narrations, means they're not acceptable with Allah, these type of marriages. So when we say invalid, we're not talking about with the non-Muslims or the non-Muslims say, but however with Allah. Because then ultimately it's about the hereafter, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring us to reckoning an account based upon everything we've done in this world, especially in our personal lives that's connected with our marriages or relationships with people. So we always have to make sure that it's something that's pleasing to Allah and that Allah will accept, and Allah will, as a result of it, reward us if it's something legislated. But if it's something not legislated, then we have to be very aware of this matter and make tawbah to Allah if it's something that's displeasing to Him, especially these types of marriages. So we discuss the affair of the shurut, or the conditions in marriage. The conditions in marriage of what we discussed is the difference between, as we said, shurut al-nikah wa shurut fi al-nikah. As the hadith of Uqbah ibn Amir, that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna ahaq al-shurut an yuwaffa bih mastahlaltum bihi al-furuj." Very most deserving of prerequisites and conditions that needs to be fulfilled is what made the private parts lawful for one another. So we discussed last class that this matter is pertaining to conditions in marriage, not the conditions of marriage. The conditions of marriage are those arkan that we know, that we already discussed. Then we have conditions in the marriage contract. And we talked about what will be an affair that will be beneficial and will rectify, and it will suit the condition or the state of the particular spouse, based upon the different types of examples we've gave in the last lesson. We talked about, for example, the maslahah, the benefit. For example, a woman will marry a man, and we say, for example, I will marry you, but I'm in a situation where I want to live with my mother. I want to live with my mother momentarily. She needs my care. She's not feeling well. She's sick, and she needs my care. So a woman can make that stipulation in the contract. And if the man, like we said, if he's can abide by it, and he can be from those who will accommodate her in that regard, then he, of course he would agree. Then it will be carried out, and he'll have to fulfill it for her. And likewise, vice versa, a man would say, for example, I'll marry you, but I have a situation with my parents. For example, I can't pay all of your bills, for example, because I have to take care of my mother and father. So my money is a little tied up, but I can do this for you. This is what I can do. So this for the woman now to either accept it or what? Either to accept it or reject it. If she accepts it, then she has to what? Fulfill it. And she can't renege while in the marriage. She cannot renege, or he cannot renege either. He cannot say, well, I'll change my mind. Like we said, which will come as a result of it, marital discord unnecessarily. And all this will play a part in the dissolvement of the marriages, whereas we're trying to preserve these marriages. Because it's a shame, but in our society, especially in the Muslim community, it's like we're just building a bunch of broke families with a bunch of children where the woman is divorced from the father and marital discord breaks out, and then a lot of our families are broke as a result of it. So we talked about the conditions in marriage, and you notice the Prophet ﷺ that he mentioned has said, أَحَقُ الشُّرُوطِ أَن يُوَفَّى بِهِ, is the most deserving of conditions that needs to be fulfilled. It's those conditions that made the private parts lawful. So, if one of the parties in the marriage does not fulfill that particular condition, then we know they have the right to ask for divorce. They're on a circumstance, they now have the grounds for dissolvement and annulment of the marriage. So he or she would not be sinful if the man divorced, if she couldn't abide by that condition that he stipulated, and likewise vice versa, if the woman stipulated a condition he can't fulfill, and he reneges and say, well, I changed my mind, then a woman should say, well, brother, this is not going to accommodate me because my parents come first. My parents come first, and me taking care of them comes first. And she would just kindly ask, well, I don't think this is going to work out. Then she kindly apologize and say, let us part in kindness. Rather, like we said, we tell our sisters and brothers not to stay in marriages to now. Stay in a situation which you're uncomfortable with until you become bitter. Because this happens to a lot of our brothers and sisters. They'll stay in conditions or situations where they're not comfortable, and they're just doing it to please the other husband, doing it to please the husband, or the husband to please the wife, while they're in a state of great discomfort. Which comes as a result of it, we hang in there until we become bitter. And we start to have hatred, and then you start to fall into other sin. So that's the reason why you'll find that these ahkam, in which we've been learning, they're very, very important to have knowledge. So, to know when we can ask, when we have perfect grounds to work out our marriage, and when we do not have grounds to work it out. And these are from those particular matters that one should try to fulfill in order to accommodate him or her or their particular spouse. Why? Because they're from those conditions that we said they has to be fulfilled. And this is a statement of the Prophet ﷺ. When the Messenger of Allah ﷺ had mentioned and said those conditions that are more deserving to be fulfilled, this is the order to give an awareness upon how the Messenger of Allah is putting even more emphasis on how these conditions and prerequisites should be fulfilled. وهذا تنبيه على آكادية الوفاء بالشروط لأنه صار من جملة الصداق ومن جملة ما استحل به فرجها. So then when the Messenger of Allah ﷺ that he gave this prerequisite, or he gave this emphasis, this is now become from the diary. It's as if now it's become from the diary. The diary that the man's offered, now it's as if it's in direct correlation with it. Now it enters inside the diary. So sisters, keep this in mind. So when a sister comes in a situation, or a brother, what have you, they come in a situation and say, yes, I'll marry you, but I want to remain, for example, close to my mother, or I want to live with my mother momentarily for as long as she needs, until she does not need my help anymore, or she's independent, or Allah gives her some relief. So now this affair becomes to what? It becomes from the aspect of the dowry now. So we know from the dowry now it has to be fulfilled. And that is part of what made the private parts, what everyone, lawful. So we know when a person gets married, he offers the dowry, and that is the actual affair that makes the private parts what? Lawful for one another. You'll also find from the benefits of this hadith is to show that if there's no marriage, then the private part is not lawful for the other. The private part of a woman is not lawful for a man and a man for the woman unless there's an actual what? Marriage. طيب. So now, it's obligatory upon the parties to fulfill it, these conditions that is agreed upon. So now let's get inside the opposite. Let's just say, for example, I think everything is clear so far, right, everyone? Is everything clear so far? طيب. So now let's get to the opposite. Let's get inside the opposite. The opposite of the conditions that are stipulated in the marriage contract. So now let's go to the opposite. What about conditions that are haram? Like conditions that are haram. What do I mean by that? There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which is a tremendous hadith, which is called Hadith Barira. Hadith Barira. Barira. Ba-ra, ya-ra, ta-marbuta. Hadith Barira. Tremendous hadith. I don't have time to explain the whole hadith of Barira. Anyway, the part of the hadith of Barira, because it's kind of lengthy. But that hadith is tremendous. But the point of reference in that hadith, Barira, is when the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned and said, كُلُّ شَرْطٍ لَيْسَ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ فَهُوَ بَاطِلٌ. Listen to what he said. So he said, every condition that's not in the book of Allah, then it is what? That it is false, it's batil, it's not acceptable. Even if it's 100 conditions. طيب, so how do we connect this with the affair of marriage now? Meaning, it's not permissible in the marriage contract that a person stipulate a condition that's haram. For example, the sister will say, I'll marry you, but we'll never be intimate. So brother would say, of course, what kind of condition is that? I'll marry you on a condition we're never intimate? Never? Never intimate. That condition is batil. A woman can't make that stipulation. Or a man can't make that stipulation. You cannot make that stipulation. Oh, sister, I'll marry you, but on a condition we're never intimate with each other. That why? Because that condition is what? Is batil. Now let's just say, for example, maybe for, let's say, if the couples say to one another, I would like to get to know you a little better before we consummate. Like we get to know each other on a more mental capacity and a more mental note, so we can see if we have some compatibility with one another. So it won't be rushed to the point where we find that we're not compatible and I can preserve your honor, whereas I didn't consummate. And if it don't work out, I can go about my way, you go about your way, and your honor will be preserved. That's something different. But still, ultimately, the intimacy will take place. But for now, for a person to say never, that condition is batil. You can't make that condition in the marriage. And that marriage, like we said, that type of condition is rejected. And it's not acceptable. For example, also another example we could give, let's just say a woman might make the stipulation in the marriage contract upon a man, I'll marry you, however, I make the condition, Allah talid, that I will never want to get pregnant. I will never want to get pregnant. I'll marry you with the condition that I never want to get pregnant. And I also want to take those different types of contraceptives to stop me getting pregnant. If she makes this condition, is it acceptable? Is it acceptable, sisters? If a sister makes this type of condition, that I want to get married, but I never want to have kids. I never want to have children, ever. Is this acceptable? Absolutely. If she makes that condition, that's unacceptable. Because that is from the greatest intent of marriage. Is to what? One of the greatest and highest goals and lofty goals of marriage is what, everyone? Is to what? For one to create and for the progeny to continue and one's lineage to continue. So if they make that condition that says, I'll marry you, but I'll never want to get you pregnant, ever. I don't want you to have none of my kids, ever. Or a sister says, all right, I will marry you, but on the condition I don't want to have any children by you, or I don't want to have any children ever. I don't want to have any children ever. That type of what? Stipulation is what? Is batil. The only time a woman, as we know, we'll talk about inshallah, that a woman can make a condition to say, brother, if you don't mind, I have to let certain circumstances, for example, the doctor says she just had a child and she has to let her body heal. And the doctor says, listen, if you get pregnant directly after you just had your previous one, it's going to put you at risk for you dying. So if this is the case, then a woman, of course, in this instance here, of course, no doubt, can say, oh, brother, listen, I don't want to have children right now until my body heals. If my body fully heals, then I'll be ready to have children. This condition is acceptable. She can make this condition. She can make this condition because it's for the detrimental in the preservation of her life and her health. So in that particular instance, she can say and make this condition in the contract. We're talking about an extreme circumstance, and there's nothing wrong with her, and there's nothing wrong with him. She has no problems in her health. She has no problems with her body. He has no problems with his health or his body. And he says, or she says, I don't want to ever have children by you. And you don't want to, I don't want you to, and the sister says, I don't want to have any children by you ever. I just don't want to get pregnant ever in my life. If she makes this condition, it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. It's a shart that opposes the Kitab and Sunnah. Why? Because it opposes the goals of marriage, which is to grow and build a family and to have a lot of children and to also likewise be a part of society where one is building a family. Tayyib. Another condition, for example, that's false, that's not acceptable. Let's just say the man makes the condition, or for example, he says in the contract, sister, I'll marry you and I'll leave divorce in your hands. I don't see why I'm married to. I'll put divorce in your hands. Your hands is in your hands. Divorce is in your hands. So if you want to divorce me, you can divorce me. If you want to divorce me, you can divorce me. Tayyib. So if a man makes this condition, it's acceptable. No, Mary, you're not laughing over there. If a man, is this a condition acceptable or not? Tayyib. Condition is unacceptable. A man cannot make divorce put it in the hands of the woman. If he makes this condition, the condition is batil, and it goes in accordance and in direct correlation with the hadith of what? Barira. Where the Prophet ﷺ said, كل شرط ليس في كتاب الله فهو باطل وإن كان 100 شرط. Every condition that's not in the book of Allah is false, meaning of the condition that opposes the book of Allah, even if it's 100 conditions. So if a man said this to the woman and said that talaq is in your hands, this shart is rejected. It's rejected. Why? It's opposing the book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Because we know that talaq, that divorce is in the hands of the man. Allah Ta'ala made talaq in the hands of a man, not in the hands of the women. Why? Because men are supposed to have more what? Control over their emotions than women. They're supposed to. If a man that is truly taking care of his body and himself, then of course he would be more at hand to control his mind. We know women take over them, different hormones, different times of the day, different times of even the day and different times of time, different times where they're all moody sometimes, the hormones is going crazy to the end of it. We know this is the nature of the women. Women will sometimes wake up in the morning happy, then in the evening or in the middle of the afternoon, for dhuhr she might be mad, then in the 2 hours later she might be sad, then she maybe some 2 hours later she'll be happy again. These are the what? This is the state of a lot of women, which can come as a result of it. If she had the hands was in divorce and she was in this state, you can imagine what probably would take place. Tayyib. So that's the reason why the talaq is in the hands of the what? Of the man, where they're supposed to be more, they're more strong as far as controlling their emotions than women. They're supposed to be like this, even though in these days and times, Tayyib. For what we say, this is the reason why the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned these conditions, that they are stipulated in the marriage contract. And if they're not fulfilled, then what? Then it could be a reason for the annulment of the marriage. And the person cannot make a condition in the marriage contract that is haram. For example, if you marry me, brother, you got to pay you got to pay my car note. The brother does not have to pay a car note. If that's something that you have a car note, you make a stipulation upon the brother, that's not obligatory upon him to pay at all. Or for these type of things, or vice versa. Sister, I'll marry you on the condition that, there's a lot of things we could mention. That you pay my car note. I'll marry you on the condition that you pay my car note. These things, like we said, are not what conditions that person can make as a stipulation upon it, because a lot of this, and their origins are haram. A lot of them, especially a lot of those transactions. A lot of them are haram. There's only a few certain circumstances where, of course, then we know you could get around the riba on those car notes. But the origin as far as in the car note and making that an obligation upon a person, then a person does not have to do that. As we'll talk about that on another occasion, inshaAllah. طيب. The next narration you'll find in Authority Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu. قال لعن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم المحلل والمحلل له رواه أحمد والنسائي والترمذي. So the next hadith. So now the next hadith also likewise is another marriage that is what? That is invalid. Is invalid. طيب. All the different marriages we've been discussing that are invalid, this is another one, which is called the ankiha, that is tahleel or tahleel. We'll talk about something making something halal. We'll talk about that and discuss in a minute. طيب. The Prophet ﷺ in the hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud that he mentioned, it said that Allah, or the message of Allah, cursed the muhallil and the muhallalu lahu. He curses the one who indulges in this type of marriage where he makes his ex-wife halal for the ex-husband. And likewise, the man who's what? The man who's cooperating upon his marriage, who's trying to get his ex-wife back to him. طيب. All these marriages of which we talked about when we discuss are invalid. طيب. For the ahadith, what we're going to discuss, inshallah, is what we're going to embark upon as far as in these narrations. All of them are called, if you want to say, just to make everything concise, straight to the point, is temporary marriages. Like a temporary marriage. And this is a type of temporary marriage as we'll discuss. And those type of temporary marriages are from al-ankihat al-batila. They're from those marriages which are invalid. For example, a man, and this is it's a type of form of what they call nikah al-mut'ah. Al-mut'ah meaning a temporary marriage where one is indulging in something that is just for pleasure, and then after a while, moment in time, it's done, it's over. Where a person marries a woman for only specific bounded period of time. Once the time is over, then the marriage contract is over, then the person doesn't have to divorce or nothing. He doesn't have to spend any money on her, and the children also he has no responsibility over the children. The children doesn't go with him, and they don't inherit from him, and he doesn't likewise, or the children don't benefit. Whereas if something was to happen to him, that the inheritance go to them. Any of these matters, all of them are null and void. And this was a type of marriage that was done before Islam, in order to make women as a so-called what? Some type of game or some type of commodity to play around with sexually, or to fulfill some desires or pleasure. Then you get rid of him like a toy or trash and keep it moving. This was a type of thing that was done in Jahiliyyah before Islam. So then the message of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of course we know, which we'll discuss, there was during the year of Ghazwatu Khaybar, during the expedition of Khaybar, the expedition of Khaybar, which is involving the Yahud, the Jews, of course. And we know that it came, or the expedition of Khaybar, in the year of the seventh year after the hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ, before the conquest of Mecca. And it came after the treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah. So the Prophet ﷺ had made this matter of temporary marriages haram on the expedition of Khaybar, and also the domestic meat of the donkey, also likewise in the eating of it. Luhum al-ahliyah. Also, we'll talk about that, inshallah. But at any rate, you'll find that same year, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. The reason why I mention this because on the 7th year of the Hijrah, after the migration, meaning after the Messenger of Allah had settled in Mecca, that 7th year, before the conquest of Mecca, he made all those marriages what? Unlawful. Temporary marriages, all of them are illegal and unlawful. Also, you look in another year, there was another expedition or another battle that took place called the Ghazwatul Awtas. Ghazwatul Awtas is basically the Ghazwa of Hunayn. Hunayn. At any rate, that year likewise, there was not the 7th year when the Ghazwatul Khaybar took place. The Ghazwatul Khaybar, that was the 7th year after the Hijrah. Then you have after the 8th year of the Hijrah, there was another battle that took place, which was the Ghazwatul Hunayn. So a person would say, what happened and why are you mentioning this? The reason why I'm mentioning this, the Prophet ﷺ had in that particular specific time only gave permission for it, for what? For 3 days. For 3 days only. In the 8th year. So when the Messenger of Allah ﷺ had what? When he had met with the people of Hawazin, which was in Hunayn, in the battle, when the actual battle took place. As we know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aided the Muslims. When the people of the tribe of Hawazin, who the Messenger of Allah and the Sahaba had battled, was the people of Hawazin. They were forced to a place called Awtas, which was close to Ta'if, which is out near Mecca. As we know, Ta'if is close to Mecca. But at any rate, there was a specific area in Ta'if called Awtas. Awtas. So the Prophet ﷺ had sent a battalion with the leader, or the one who was leading the battalion was Abi Amir al-Ash'ari, in which Allah Ta'ala had gave victory at his hands over the people of Hawazin in that particular place. When we was mentioning this hadith, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, the reason why we're mentioning this because during that period of time only, meaning the 8th year after the Hijrah and the Ghazwatul Hunayn, meaning they also has 2 names. Not only you'll find if you look the books of history, it was called the Battle of Hunayn. It was also called the Battle of Awtas. The Battle of Awtas. Because that's what the place where they was forced in. But anyway, that particular year, the Messenger of Allah had gave temporary marriage, gave it and made it legal for only 3 days, and that was it. So basically, and after that, it became haram forever. So it's not permissible for a person to indulge inside of temporary marriage. We'll get inside the different sisters between nikah al-mut'ah and nikah bi niyyat al-talaq. There is a difference between the two. Because some of the Muslims mix it up, and I've constantly heard this on many occasions. You'll find that people constantly mix up 2 affairs. Number one is a temporary marriage. The difference between a temporary marriage and a marriage with the intent of divorce. It's a difference between the two. Slightly. Are they haram? Of course. We'll talk about that, discuss that. But they're not the same exactly. They're not the same. So keep that in mind. The difference between nikah al-mut'ah, temporary marriage, and a nikah bi niyyat al-talaq. Bi niyyat al-talaq. A marriage with the intent of divorce. It's a difference. We'll explain in a minute. So temporary marriage now had 3 stages. The first stage, number 1. So you'll find حرمها النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم رخص فيها. So number 1, the first stage it was haram. Then there was a second stage where it was allowed for a short time only. Then the Messenger of Allah ﷺ made it haram forever. And that is a consensus of Ahl Ilm, starting with the Sahaba, that a temporary marriage is invalid. As for it being allowed for a short amount of time, it was allowed and then it was what? Abrogated. وَلَا يُرَخِّصُ فِيهِ إِلَّا الرَّافِضَةِ. For the people who only allow it now is the Shia. They still practice it to this day. Is the Shia and the Rawafid still to this day practice this. This filthy, and if you hear some of the stuff that they indulge in with their wives and their families, it's not too far off for what they call swingers, of what they do here in America. It's not too far off. It's almost as if it's the same thing. And I'm sure people know what I'm talking about, what they call swingers now. And I heard some of the Muslims are indulging in that filth, which is something surprising. So now the Rawafid and the Shia, they're the ones that what? Practice this type of what? This marriage that the Prophet ﷺ made it haram forever for one to indulge in. So for now to say that the Shia, they're the ones that do it, see it's Muslims that do it, then of course we know there is no consideration for their so-called acknowledgement of this type of marriage. Why? Because it clearly opposes what Allah and His Messenger have what? Sent down of clear text, making this matter unlawful forever. So for no one to now to indulge in this, they will indulge in something that Allah is displeased with. It's not permissible for one person to indulge in temporary marriage. طيب. So now what's the difference between the marriage of mut'ah, a temporary marriage, and a marriage with the intention of divorce? What's the difference? What's the difference? The difference, number one, is as far as temporary marriage, then it's mentioned in the contract. It's stipulated. Me and the sister will only be married for a week. So the sister is on clarity, and the man is on clarity. So they both know what's going to what? Happen. It's made it in the contract. It's stipulated. It's clear. Clear as the sun in the sky. I'll marry you for only a week. And she says, he says, I'll marry you only for a week. Or he says, I'll marry you for only a month, or I'll marry you for only a month. That's it. Then after that, contract's over, done. So notice in the contract itself, both parties are applying what, sisters? They're applying clarity. Everybody knows what's going to happen. Is it clear what I'm saying? One side knows what the other is going to do. This type of marriage contract is from the beginning. It does not carry out. And when I say carry out, meaning with Allah, it's unacceptable. This type of marriage contract is displeasing to Allah. Why? Because the Messenger of Allah ﷺ made it what? Unlawful. طيب. Let's get now what they call divorce with the intent, marriage with the intent of divorce. When a person now gets inside of this type of marriage, the other doesn't know what the one intends. He or she keeps it hidden. So you start to see now the difference. Like, I'm marrying you, but it's no sign whatsoever that the person intends to divorce the other. It's not made clear. The person keeps it in his intent. Oh, I'm just going to marry him. In the back of my mind, I'm only going to be married to this sister for only a couple of weeks. Then I'm going to move on. So a person now has this type of what? Mentality. She don't know what's going to happen. She don't know what's in the heart of the man, what he's intending. He comes on with a nice face, nice smile. And likewise the sister. Come out with a nice smile. Yeah, I'll marry you. But she knows in the back of her mind, I love my ex-husband or whatever. I'm just being realistic. I know eventually I'm going to go back to him. But, I married his brother. This is what's going on in her mind. But eventually I know I'm going to leave you. I don't have the intent to stay with you. So, but one of the side of the parties doesn't know what the other is what? Intending. Is it clear so far what I'm saying? So now that's the difference between nikah al-mut'ah and the difference between nikah bi niyyat al-talaq. The marriage with a what? Intent to divorce. You see the differences now? So that's the differences. Because I heard certain people say that they're the same. They're not the same. They're not the same. One is made clear in the contract, the other isn't. One doesn't know what one is intending ultimately. Is it haram to do this? Of course. I'm clearly with the opinion, of course, with no doubt. That's haram to do this. I'm coming to a marriage with my total intent not to stay or build a family. I'm just going to be with this woman temporarily to have some enjoyment. And once I get bored, she's out the door. Why? And the great Imam Al-Albani, rahimahullah, had used the example of one's family and flipped it against a person who said, well, it's not haram. We can't say it's haram. So Shaykh Al-Albani mentioned, said, someone now did this to your mother. They married her just to have some sexual enjoyment temporarily. Would you like that? Somebody had the niyyah just to marry your mother for just to be for a short period of time, enjoy her, and then after that, divorce her. Would you like somebody to do that to your mother? Would you like somebody to do that to your sister? Would you like somebody to have that type of marriage? They don't know that they intended to divorce her. Somebody did that to your daughter, you'll be ready to what? Hurt him. Some man comes, he just wants to temporarily marry your daughter for some couple of period of time. You'll be ready here, and especially in this crazy country, you'll be ready to shoot his head off. So why would you now want to do that to somebody else's daughter? Why would you now want to marry them but they keeping their intention concealed from what you ultimately want to what? Do with her. So this thing is not befitting that one. Do it. So that now, as far as the marriage in regards to the temporary marriage, that is invalid from its origin. Doesn't even carry out. Doesn't even carry out at all. And both sides are what? Are sinful because they agreed in the contract. As far as the niyat al-talaq, the one that he goes in and he's hot in his intent, not necessarily is it invalid, but he does fall into something of what is considered haram, whereas he's intending some type of evil, where it is an intent or opposes the asl or one of the origins of the goals of Islam, which is to build families and to multiply children, to have numerous children and build families, to build communities. That type of marriage contradicts that, which makes this type of marriage haram, of course. But is both parties sinful? No, because one didn't know what the other was intending. So he or she is not what? Oh, excuse me. Depending, of course, on the niyyah. If the person came in with intentions to be with a family, be with a person, be with a spouse, and they wanted to last, here in this instance, of course, they're not sinful. But if they intended this evil, like I know from the beginning, that I know I'm not going to be with this person too long, then in that particular instance, that person is sinful. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? طيب. So now that brings us to the next hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, that the Prophet ﷺ said, not only is this marriage invalid, but the Prophet ﷺ cursed the one who indulged in this type of marriage, which is called nikah al-tahleel. Nikah al-tahleel. That the Prophet ﷺ cursed the muhallil and the muhallalu lahu. طيب, this hadith has been narrated by Imam Ahmad Nasai. Of course, we have no doubt in its authenticity. As great Imam from Imam Al-Albani authenticated the hadith, along with the great Imam Sheikh Salih Fawzan bin Abdullah Al-Fawzan, also they said the isnad is authentic. That the Prophet ﷺ cursed al-muhallil. طيب, the origin of this hadith, as we know Islamically, in regards to our religion, that if a man was to divorce his wife, where they arrive now to the third divorce. As we know, the third divorce now comes after it, what, everyone? Certain ahkam, certain rulings. So if a man divorced his wife once, she has a waiting period and he could take her back, or they can both sit and reflect, and they might figure they still love each other and come back. So it's another opportunity. Then they might, for example, a second time, he might divorce her. Then they could still reflect, try to gather their thoughts, and try again to work out their affair and make sure and try to make it work again. However, now they have to be on what? Be cautious now, because the third divorce, there's no going back after that. There's no going back after that. طيب. So now let's just say, for examples, that the man divorced his wife a third time. Of course, we know it's not in the religion of Islam. Now it's not permissible for the man to take her back, and she becomes haram for him until she marries someone else. And that marriage of someone else has to be a nikah al-raghba. It has to be nikah where she's actually interested in marrying that other man, where her intent is to stay with him. And she is to stay with her. So now this is what? This is the asl, this is the origin. So it's not halal for her to return back to him after that third divorce, as we know, until she marries someone else. That nikah, but keep in mind, the reason why I made this second detail, where I said nikah al-raghba, the marriage where she truly is interested in that other man, meaning to stay with him, to have longevity in a marriage with him, and likewise vice versa with her, meaning forever, basically. That's their intent, was for us to stay married to whenever. It cannot be for the intent where it's called, for what they call niyah or nikah al-tahleel, meaning that I know that I divorced, for example, the man divorces his wife, they arrived to the third divorce, so now he knows she can't return back to him. She can't return back to him. So now he gets a friend of his. Yo, my man, I want my wife back. Can you marry my wife, consummate with her, then divorce her? So now it's halal for her to come back to who? To come back to me. This is what you call nikah al-tahleel. This is called the marriage of what? Making something halal. Meaning halal of the third wife returning back to the what? To the ex-husband. To the first. Is it clear what I'm saying so far? If a person indulges in this type of marriage, number one, the person is cursed. And not only is the man cursed along with the man who conspired along with him to do this. And if the woman is upon knowledge, if she's upon knowledge, then likewise she falls under it too. But if she's not upon knowledge of it, maybe he might have sent her, or the second brother now is proposing a marriage. She didn't know that was her ex-husband's friend, or that they were planning this. She had no idea. If she has no idea whatsoever, she's not what? She's not sinful. However, if she agrees, she likewise falls under the la'n, under the curse. Is it clear what I'm saying so far? Not only is he or the people who indulge in this matter cursed, also they still are not able to attain what they wanted because the marriage is still invalid, ultimately. Why is this marriage invalid? Because the person is trying to play what? He's trying to play the trick with Allah. To make the husband so-called what? Make make the ex-wife halal for her ex-husband. The friend is trying to make the man's ex-wife halal for him and her so they could come back together. This type of marriage, number one, is invalid. And number two, also likewise, the person is cursed. And number three, also likewise, if we was in Islamic courts, they would never, all of them would be separated. Nobody, inevitably the woman still couldn't go back to her ex-husband. So what they did it for, they couldn't even do it at all. So three things. Number one, the curse of Allah. Number two, on top of that, the marriage is invalid. And number three, like we said, if we was in an Islamic court and it's to reach the courts and the authorities, they would separate between all of them to the point where if it happened, where the man did enter into her and he consummated with her, then she still couldn't go back to her ex-husband. So all three of those ahkam have been arranged in regards to this type of what? This type of marriage that is invalid. So we said, and I'm going to read quickly what the great Imam Sheikh Salih Fawzan even mentioned in this regard. He says, هذا نكاح التحليل وإنما كان باطلا لأنه ليس القصد منه النكاح الشرعي وإنما القصد منه الحيلة على استباحة ما حرم الله لما كان يحرم على مطلق الثلاث أن يتزوجها إلا بعد زوج آخر تحيل هذا التيس المستعار فتزوجها زواجا ظاهره الصحة, at the end of it. He says this type of nikah is invalid. Why? Because the intent behind it is not a legislated marriage. Rather, the intent behind it is a trick or some type of deception in order to make valid or make lawful what Allah made haram. Meaning unlawful upon the man who divorced his wife 3 times. That he fell into it, divorced her 3 times, that he marry her again, except after another marriage. He says, as if tahayyala had the taste of musta'ar, or this type of person who is a hidden type of, he was giving an example of like an animal who borrowed someone in order to marry his wife, which in actuality it shows as if it is valid. However, what is intended by it is tahleel, meaning to make the wife halal for the first spouse or the first ex-husband. For this nikah is what? Rejected. And it's not permissible. She still will not be permissible for her what? Ex-husband. He says rather because they are deserving of this type of what? This uquba ar-radi'ah. This type of punishment that will be given to them, which will be considered a deterrent, not to indulge in it. Is it clear so far, sisters, what I'm saying? Jayid. I think we got to get too much more details in that. I think that's clear. طيب. Another marriage that's haram. Let's move on to the next hadith. So we can try to end off the chapter as much as we can. Now look to this hadith. I think a lot of people are not aware of this hadith here. This hadith here, once you hear the explanation of it, it'll probably blow your mind. طيب. Hadith Abu Hurairah. It's time. The hadith Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. And I think that a lot of the brothers need to be here for this lesson. A lot of the brothers, it's sad that the people think that these classes for the sisters, these are for the men too. The men need usul al-thalatha. And they need the ahadith of nikah. Real bad. طيب. The hadith Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا ينكح الزاني المجلود إلا مثله. This hadith is tremendous. رواه أحمد أبو داود ورجاله ثقات. Listen to this hadith. That the fornicating man who has been lashed does not marry except someone who is similar to him. Just listen. This hadith, when you hear it, the explanation is probably be based upon what you probably thought, but it's not what you think. Just listen. So the fornicating man that's been lashed does not marry anyone except someone similar to him. So we'll start off by this hadith. So listen. Also, now listen to this. From those marriages that are invalid is a fornicating woman and a fornicating man that did not make tawbah from their zina. For example, it's not permissible for a Muslim to marry a woman and she did not make tawbah from her zina. However, what is intended when the Prophet ﷺ said majlood, meaning lashed? It's not meaning actual, it can be meaning of lashed, but not necessarily. The meaning of majlood is just to put more emphasis to mean the person that has been absolutely clear and established that they fornicated. Even though the actual lash did not happen. What does that apply to everyone here in this room? Boyfriend and girlfriend. Person getting a boyfriend, getting a girlfriend. They've been boyfriend and girlfriend for 2 months. They've been friends for 2 months, intimately. Now they come to the masjid, what? Oh, I'm going to get married. We want to marry. I want to marry her. So that shows clearly that this type, if we was to marry them off, then what, everyone? The marriage would be invalid. The marriage is invalid. So a lot of people think, where's the dalil for that? This is the dalil right here. So know for sure that it says, and I'm going to read what Sheikh Salih Fawzan mentioned. He says the word when the Prophet ﷺ mentioned majlood, meaning lash, he says the meaning of it is whose. It's established and clear that they fornicated, even though they might not have been lashed. So this man is not permissible to marry a chaste woman or chaste woman. And likewise, vice versa. It's not permissible for her to marry a chaste man. For a man that's afif. Afif meaning chaste. And I think in the UK they say chaste. Chaste man or a chaste man. So if a chaste or a chaste man was to marry a woman that was a fornicating woman that did not make tawbah, so in those circumstances, the marriage contract is what? Invalid. It's invalid. And that's due to the ayah, as Allah Ta'ala says in His book, الزاني لا ينكح إلا زانية أو مشركة والزانية لا ينكحها إلا زان أو مشرك وحرم ذلك على المؤمنين. If you go back to this tafsir of this ayah, it's tremendous. This ayah is sort of Nur. I think it's the fourth ayah, either the fourth or fifth ayah, is sort of the Nur. But anyway, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in His book, the fornicating man does not marry, a fornicating man does not marry except a fornicating woman or a polytheist. Listen to this. When you see the meaning of it or the tafsir of it, it'll blow your mind too. He says, in a fornicating woman, no one marries her except a fornicating man or a polytheist, a man who's a polytheist. All of that has been haram upon the mu'mineen. الزاني لا ينكح إلا زانية أو مشركة والزانية لا ينكحها إلا زان مشرك وحرم ذلك على المؤمنين. To the end of it. Surah An-Nur. طيب. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says all of that has been made unlawful upon the believers, it is a dalil to show of the invalidity of a marriage to a woman that is a fornicating woman that did not make tawbah from her fornication. And likewise, vice versa. When Allah Ta'ala, we could get to explanation. It's not the time right now. I wanted to get into it. طيب. We had the time right now. At any rate, that's the meaning of the hadith. So this ayah, this hadith and this ayah, this is Surah An-Nur, is to show what, everyone? One cannot marry another what? Person if it has been established they are fornicating. I will get in some details of what Shaykh Uthaymeen even gave as an extra detail in this regard. He said this is from the origin that is batil. What if they got married and they fall into it? Is it invalid or not? That's another question. Another question. Shaykh Uthaymeen gave a good fa'idah to this. He said, as far as if one was to marry a fornicating woman, of course we know the marriage contract is invalid from the beginning. He said, however, in the aspect of fiqh, keep in mind, there's a qa'idah that they say, al-ibtida'. He says it's aqwa min al-tawassut. Basically to sum up everything, I don't make it too long to carry it out. He says the affair of what it starts off has more strength than if it's already been carried out and it was done within it. Which is speech for another occasion. What does he mean by that? Meaning, in the origin of it, the marriage contract is done. If one was to marry a woman, he knowingly knows that he or she fornicated. Or they're fornicating. And they didn't make tawbah. He says, however, in the middle, after the marriage is done, where one falls into it or something to that effect, he says that's something different. Where the marriage still can be valid, but however, still one has the grounds to what? Nullify the marriage. Which I'll talk about later on another occasion. طيب. Last hadith, I know sisters, they're very interested in this, right? طيب. Last hadith. There's other details I wanted to give, but I'm trying to keep everything concise. I don't want to make it too long, too many details. طيب. Last hadith in this chapter. Listen to this hadith. All the sisters with me? طيب. Hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha. Listen, it says, طلق رجل امرأته ثلاثا فتزوجها رجل ثم طلقها قبل أن يدخل بها فأراد زوجها الأول أن يتزوجها فسئل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن ذلك فقال لا حتى يذوق الآخر من عسيلتها ما ذاق الأول. Hadith of Aisha. He said that a man divorced his wife. It was 3 divorces. So another man divorced her. Another man married her. Then likewise, he divorced her before. He divorced her before he what? Before he consummated. And the ex-husband, the first one, wanted to marry her back. So the Prophet ﷺ mentioned it, said about that. He says, no, until the other has tasted her honey, and likewise, similar to that, vice versa. What does that mean? I'll read this quickly, and then we'll stop the lesson. Wow, man, time is flying. تقدم لنا أن المرأة المطلقة ثلاث. As we already been established that the woman that's been married, that's been on the 3rd divorce, is not permissible to go back to what? To her ex-husband until she what? Until she marries another. And like we said, the condition that has to be what? Nikah raghba, not nikah tahleel. Right, everyone? It has to be nikah where they plan to be each other. Not a marriage that she's just trying to make, where he's trying to make her halal to go back to the other man. Now, if he divorced her and the iddah is over, of course, وينتهي وتنتهي عدتها عند ذلك يستطيع زوجها الأول أن يتزوجها, of course, ثم يطلقها. وإن تنتهي عدتها عند ذلك يستطيع زوجها الأول أن يتزوجها. لكن لو جاء واحد وعقد عليها عقدا صحيحا وليس عنده نكاح تحليل ولا تحيل وكان له رغبة لكن طلقها قبل أن يطأها. Now this is what we just mentioned and said. So now, it has to be another man where it's nikah or raghba, not nikah tahleel. Marriage or raghba. Marriage of, he has total interest in her and desire her, and it can't be just for what? To make her halal, to go back. Of course, now, if this was the case, and he divorced her, and her iddah is over, meaning the second situation, not the first. Let's just say now, sisters, that the man had to plan on marrying and staying with her. Let's just say they didn't work out. Is it permissible now for her to go back to the what? First husband or not? Let's see if you guys are paying attention. I'll say it again. Stop eating chips. So listen to what he says. I'll say it again. Let's just say now she married another man, the second situation. The ex-husband has nothing to do with the second marriage whatsoever. I don't know the dude. I don't know the man. I shouldn't say dude, stuff with Allah. I don't know the brother. He doesn't know me, whatever, to the end of it, right? So they get married. And he has, of course, it's genuine, sincere, it's legit. The brother plans to stay with her. She stands to play with him, staying with him, have longevity to the end of it. Let's just say that situation didn't work out either. And their marriage is over. Is it permissible now for her to return back to the first husband? Exactly. If they consummate, exactly. Jayid. As long as if he consummated and that was legit marriage, they didn't work out, then is it permissible for her to go back to the first husband, the first situation? Yes. Yes, it is. Are we almost finished? What's about to call the adhan now? I'm almost finished. We gotta wait for the adhan. All right, brother, I'll think about to call the adhan. You calling it now? Amir. You can't hear me. I think he is time. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. السلام ورحمة الله. Are you sure? Shalom Muhammad Rasulullah. حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. Brothers, don't forget the adhan is being called. The adhan is being called. Try to repeat what comes after the adhan instead of talking. Brothers, they're calling the adhan. We should try to repeat after what the adhan is being called. Just wait till after the adhan and resume our conversation. حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. الله أكبر الله أكبر. اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمد الصيد الفضيل وبعث ومقام محمود الذي وعدته. طيب. طيب, so let's just say now that the new situation that the sister is in, he never consummated. Is it still now halal for her to return and resume her situation with the previous husband? Jay. That's the understanding of the hadith. So the man who divorced his wife cannot return back to him until she's in a marriage that is what? Nikah al-Raghbah. Nikah al-Raghbah meaning not a marriage of interest only, but a marriage where the marriage was consummated and the marriage was shown truly of what was considered longevity in that particular marriage. Other than that, she still cannot return back to him until the actual consummation of that marriage took place. And that's just to sum up the meaning of the hadith. And that's when the Messenger of Allah ﷺ had clearly said in the last part where he said no, until حَتَّى يَذُوقَ الْآخَرُ مِنْ عُسَيْلَتِهَا مَا ذَاقَ الْأَوَّلِ. He says until the other, or the latter, had tasted from her honey from what the first tasted, meaning the first husband. Meaning that it was intimacy, of course. So that contract, or marriage contract, doesn't suffice if there wasn't any intimacy. Until, if she wants to return back to him or her, he has interest in return of marrying her again, the first, there has to be in a marriage that was what? Absolutely carried out, and it was a nikah where both was interested, and likewise, like we said, intimacy took place. And that's just to sum it up, because there's a little bit more details, but we'll keep it to this extent. We get too much details. طيب. So that concludes this part of the chapter. And there's another chapter which will start, inshallah, which is called the chapter of kafa'a wal khiyar, the chapter of adequacy and alternative, which is the next part. The chapter of al-kafa'a, meaning adequacy, and al-khiyar, meaning alternative. طيب, any questions about the lesson? تفضلي. تفضل. As far as for me, I'm on the opinion that a man can't marry the woman of the book these days. I'm strongly and firmly on that. So that's the first thing. I'll say that the marriage is invalid based upon the fact that the women of these book or these particular days and times, it's not permissible to marry them. These women or the people of the book of these days. That's number one. So the marriage wouldn't be valid in its origin. Usually in most cases, because even Imam Al-Albani, when he was talking about this, he says, when do you know that non-Muslim women, usually in most cases, will marry you without having sex with them first? He says, which shows you more than likely they have the belief that what they're doing there's nothing wrong with it. He says, in contrast to you'll find that the people of the book from before in the past, they had some respect to the point where they believed that marriage or intimacy or intimacy out of marriage was something detested and something that was unlawful. That's in contrast to the majority of the people of the book of these days. They think that or sexual or intimacy is legal. There's nothing wrong with it. And that's what goes back to that ayah, which is a sort of nur, that I wanted to give extra details in, but I try to keep everything summarized. When the law says that a fornicating man does not marry except a fornicating woman or a polytheist. Why did Allah say polytheist? Because it's not permissible to marry a woman or a man that's a polytheist. Why? Because they have the i'tiqad, they have the belief that what they're doing is what? Is halal. They have the belief that what they're doing is what? Is lawful. There's nothing wrong with it. That's why Allah mentioned polytheists. Because polytheists usually, in most cases, they all believe that fornication or adultery is nothing wrong with it. There's really nothing wrong with it, especially fornication. It's nothing absolutely wrong with that. At any rate, the point I'm trying to make is, if a man is to marry a non-Muslim woman, of course, I believe totally, without a shadow of a doubt, is invalid. That's number one. Number two, if a man who's a Muslim, that if he falls into fornication, he has to make tawbah. That's number two. He has to make tawbah. Because fornication is something tremendous, especially adultery. Also, likewise, the woman that's a woman of the book, if she becomes Muslim, then that's her tawbah. Because we know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, inna Islam yajubu ma qablahu, that Islam erases what came before it. So meaning, as long as she's upright in the religion, then her tawbah would have been her what? Her entering the fold of Islam. That's her tawbah. So now she has a clean slate, whereas he is sinful. Is it clear what I'm saying? No. So that's basically it. But I'm on a strong absolute opinion that it is not permissible to marry the woman of the book of these days. It's not permissible to marry a woman of the book these days. I cannot see how a Muslim man who is truly practicing the religion can walk in a house with a cross wearing, fornicating, weave having, tight, never ever cleaning her private part, pork eating, to the end of it woman. I don't see how the jealousy of a man would want to marry a woman like that. Most cursing, most foul mouth, most cursing, profanity using, mushrik, hollering out, Jesus in the house in front of your kids. How that the jealousy of yourself wouldn't take you over. The most musical listening, weave having, tight jeans, not purifying herself in the bathroom to the end of it. And how a Muslim Salafi man can even be what wants something like that. So her tawbah will what? Her tawbah will be her Islam. So when she comes to the fold of Islam, then what? Then that would be her tawbah, and it's permissible for the marrier after he has made tawbah. If he's made tawbah, there's something different. We'll talk about that later. But he has to make tawbah. And from the tawbah is, he has to stay away from her. Can't have no contact with her. Can't be on the phone. I miss you, baby. Can't wait till this is over. No. You have to have no connection with her. You cannot be on the phone with her. You can't have any connection. That's part of the tawbah. Is it clear? Any other questions about the lesson? We only got 3 minutes. We got to pray.